Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Streaming Alchemy. I'm John Mahoney, and on today's show, we're going to be taking a look at a new tool we can use to script automation, Node.js. And in doing this, we'll dig a little bit deeper into some of the different techniques we can start to use in the future to sculpt more complex automations. But before we get to that, I would like to welcome everybody. Please, if you have any comments, if you have any feedback, just put them in the comments below and we'll get to them here on the show. Also, if you would like to join us on the show to talk about anything related to the topic or in the after show, if you just like to pop in and have a chat about anything, please, we welcome you to click on the link below. It's in the show notes, and it would be great to have you come join us here. So let's get started. The first thing I probably want to touch on is give you a little bit of background of what the show is and isn't. So what we wanted to do for the show is give everyone a first look at how you could use basically JavaScript, Node.js, as part of the automation toolkit that we've been developing, throughout this season and what we'll also be developing in our next season. And in doing that, I'm not going to present this as a complete tutorial. We're going to go over code. We're going to go over some of the basic foundational elements for getting started with Node.js. But I will freely admit that this is something I am learning as we go as well. So there'll be things here that I probably won't be able to answer off the bat if you have questions on today's show, but we'll certainly, give you a good initial look at what we have with Node.js and the possibilities that it holds. So let's talk a bit then about what Node.js is. There was originally a scripting language inside of browsers called JavaScript. And JavaScript allowed a lot of the automation that we see in browsers, the back and forth, the interactivity, to be codified and executed. And because that was limited to browsers, there were tools developed, Node being probably the principal one, that allow you now to take and write JavaScript code and execute it in areas outside of the browser. You can now run this on any system without necessarily having a browser executing it. And that gives you a lot of flexibility, but because it's JavaScript, the core simplicity of that language still carries over here. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that Node.js is open source, which probably in the simplest terms translates to it's free. You can download it at nodejs.org, and it has it for, and this is the other good part, for cross-platform implementation. So it is Windows, it is Mac, it is Linux. So you can run Node.js scripted code on any environment that you will be running in your production. So it gives you a lot of flexibility there. The other thing is that it was designed for real-time two-way communication. And that means it's perfect for the types of things we want to do, where you'll be controlling different components of your production, whether it's vMix, whether it's things like last week's SuperJoy, or whether it's other devices that you may have like a TriCaster. All of these can now be part of an integration automation script that you put together in your productions. But the most powerful thing here is that Node.js allows you to install different what they call packages. It has a package manager that basically extends the core functionality of Node.js with these libraries of code that are freely available. And because it's integrated as a single package, oh, excuse me, because it's integrated as a single package. Oh, I am sorry. Let me grab a drink here. Because it's integrated now as a single package, sorry about that. You just have to type install in the name of the package, and it now becomes part of your overall environment. And if you think about some of the things I've said in the past, in vMix scripting, you're really limited to what was in .NET 2.x, and you really couldn't extend much beyond that for things you want to do in scripting. Those limitations are now all gone when you look at Node.js as an implementation tool. So the way you work with Node.js, and then we'll get into the code here, is you install it on whatever environment you want to install it in. So Windows, Mac, whatever. You then can work with Visual Studio Code, the same tool, the same IDE. It's not really an IDE, but the same code editor we've been using all along. And then you can open up a prompt to a command line inside of Visual Studio and add your libraries, add the packages that you want, add and edit code, and execute it. So it's going to be in some ways different, but in some ways very similar to everything we've done up to this point with vMix scripting. So before I get into the code, let me just check on the comment section here and see who's joined us. So we have Alan Bunt from Wisconsin. Alan, thank you for joining us. Good to see you here. We have David. David, how are you? Thank you for joining us. Good to see you again here. We have Sisay. Happy Friday to you as well, Sisay. Thank you. So we have America Newscape, and he's got a smile for open source there. So yes, absolutely. Free is good. So I definitely appreciate that. And so let's see. Alan also popped back from the YouTube side, so he's watching us on both locations. So I apologize. I probably would not be able to pronounce the Cyrillic, but I appreciate you joining us. And thank you for taking the time here. Have John Drinkwater saying waiting to learn. So John, thank you. I believe you're joining us from the UK. We have Guy. Guy's also joining, and he has in the comment, he has looks like a nice drink with a straw coming out of it. So hopefully he's getting a chance to relax. We got Dennis from the Netherlands. Dennis, thank you very much for joining us here. We have, let's see, Shrikant. So Shrikant, thank you. Great to have you here as well. And we have Awesome Productions. Wishing everyone a happy Friday. So awesome. Thank you for joining us here. So let's talk a bit about the code now, because we're going to dive into this. What I wanted to do to make this something that was a clear parallel between something we've already worked on, I am taking the show that we did last week, where we controlled a PTZOptics SuperJoy from within vMix scripting. I am taking that now and rewriting it to work in Node.js. So you'll have a one-to-one comparison between something we did last week and the Node.js version of it this week. So hopefully that will make this a little more approachable. But let me jump over to the code here. So there's a few things as we start to get into the code here that are important to note. The first one is Node.js allows you to have functions. So you can now create reusable bits of code that you can stitch together and call from other bits of code. So unlike scripting, where it all really sat in one main execution loop, inside of Node.js, you can have things broken into different functions. So that's one thing when we go through the structure that you'll notice. The other thing is that this is probably what you'd call a loosely typed language. We don't have to actually declare things, whether they're strings or integers or anything like that. So you basically, that typing is almost, I'd say, inherited, but that's probably not the right term, by the function that is doing the assignment to the variable. So something else to keep in mind. We're not going to be seeing that here in Node.js. The other thing is it is a very similar language with some of the structures, but other things will be very different for for how you construct the syntax of the language. But logically, a lot of the stuff will carry over pretty cleanly. So let's dig in. And we're going to start right here at the top where I've got this section of code right here. And what we're looking at here is what I mentioned in the beginning with the ability to add packages. So we're going to need some external functionality in order to do the code that we're putting here in Node. The first thing we're going to load is a package called Axios. And Axios basically is the tool we need to make all the HTTP requests. So that was really WebRequester that we looked at in last week's show. So that whole piece of logic that was sort of baked into .NET, now we're loading that to a package called Axios. And that's what we do with the const Axios equals require Axios. That is basically telling this program, make sure you load that library and that functionality for us because we're going to need that. And it's assigning it to the root constant Axios, AXIOS with the capital A. And that allows us now to execute any functions in that package by the standard where it's an object and a method. So when we go Axios dot, and then the method we want to execute, that carries over here. And that's something that we saw in .NET, but it's going to be the same thing here, executed a different way. So we have Axios. We have something called XML to JavaScript, and that's going to let us take and pull in XML because we still look at the vMix XML, and it's going to convert that into something that we can use inside of JavaScript, which is basically a JSON structure. And we talked about JSON in the past as well. And then the last thing we're doing is something called XML to JS-XPath. And what this will let us do is it will let us use XPath to identify components of the XML that will now be JSON converted when we read it in, and be able to pull out specific items. Again, things that we've sort of implied in past scripting, we're doing some more explicit things here, and we're pulling those in as packages that we need. So the next thing, and this is the first time we're bumping into a function. And interestingly enough, there is no primitive for sleeping, for just telling the program, wait for a second or wait for 5 seconds. So there is no primitive to do that. So what we have to do is we have to write our own function to do that we can call in other parts of our program. And so we call this function sleep. And the next line of code is going to look incredibly complicated and meaningless unless we touch upon the next thing about Node.js that's important to know. And that is, it is basically a asynchronous language. And by that, I mean that you will make a call, and that call will execute on its own in the background. And when it's done, it'll come back and say, here's the answers that I have as a result. Here's what I'm returning as a result of that call. And I know that sounds confusing, but it really is. A lot of programming is based on this type of model where you spin a function off, it does its thing, and then you give it away to come back and tell you, I'm done, here's the answer. So that sort of asynchronous processing is here. And in JavaScript, and in a lot of languages, not just JavaScript, that method, that model of execution is called creating a promise. So that's where the term promise comes in there. What a promise is when you tell a function to create a promise, it is saying, I will come back to you either because I succeeded and give you the answer that you were looking for, the return result, or I have failed and I'll give you, the reason for the failure. And it gives you the ability to say, if you succeed, come back and give it to me in this location, or if you fail, come back and give it to me in another. So it's a more complicated way of thinking about code, but it's a much, much more powerful way. You can spin off a whole lot of things simultaneously and then wait for them all to finish later on. So in this case, all we're doing is we've created a promise here for sleeping, and we're telling it, call the function resolve when you're done, and the code I want you to execute in this function is called set timeout. And in set timeout, you basically say, uh, wait this many milliseconds, then call resolve. So this is basically a very simple function here. It's basically doing its own timeout. And then when that timeout completes, the promise is fulfilled and it returns the value and says, I'm done. And it's just basically falling out of itself when it finishes. And so that's the first function we've created. Don't worry if this isn't completely clear. I appreciate that this could be a little bit intimidating, but hopefully over time, as we do more of this in the future, a lot of this stuff will become second nature. So the next function we have is what's in typical computer parlance sort of your main function. This is the one that you're going to want to execute as soon as your program starts. And we're saying it's an asynchronous function. Like I said, it can go off and execute on its own, and other things can execute beside it. And now we're going to get into a lot of the logic that will seem very familiar based on what we did on last week's show. So we're going to start out with, let's turn around and say there was no previous preview input. If you remember in last week's show, when we put a input in vMix into preview, it would automatically switch the SuperJoy controller to control that camera that was in preview. So it was a very streamlined way of making sure that whatever was selected in vMix was identically selected on the physical controller, so you could pan, tilt, and zoom the camera without having to press any buttons. So we're starting out by saying there's nothing there is nothing in preview, and then we're going into that logical loop that we had in last week's show, where you're just going to keep checking in the background. And that's what we have here with this while true. And so this line of code now is going to start to use some of the packages that we brought in at the beginning, where we required those as coming in. So we have here basically we're saying, let's set result up as null. Result is going to be the result of us executing a HTTP request. And that's the first thing we do inside this while loop. We go back and we tell Axios to do a get. So Axios again is the HTTP package that we loaded, and we're telling it to go into the local host and get basically where vMix is sitting at port 8088/API and getting the vMix XML. So this line here is just getting the vMix XML and creating an object called result that will contain that. Result is basically a WebResponse object. So it has different elements to it. But one property of that is the data inside of that. And so assuming we get this, that's what the try is. It's making sure this was executed correctly. If we didn't get any data, if vMix weren't up, if it had trouble reading it couldn't get to the computer because the network were unplugged, that would be the type of thing where we wouldn't get a result. And in that case, like we have the try and catch, which we did in the past with the different scripting, it's basically going to post an error that says, okay, it failed to get the vMix API, show what the error is, and then it's going to wait, remember, 10 seconds and do that sleep. So that would give somebody a chance to start up vMix or plug in the computer or whatever they needed to do. So nothing different technically from what we've done in the past, where it's just trying to get it, and if it can't, it goes into the catch. Otherwise, it assigns the vMix XML to an object. So now, assuming we have the vMix XML object, we'll go down to the next block of code here, and we are going to pull the data from that object, and we're going to convert it into JSON. And that's, again, not something that you really need to know the mechanics behind yet, but what we have is if you remember, Parse XML was the XML to JS. That's the basically the object that we created for that. And we're telling it, take the result that we had from Axios, which is up here, take the result and pull the data out from that result. So we're just taking the Vmix XML, putting it in here, and we're assigning it into Parse JSON API. So that's the data. And it gives us now again, that same thing. This is basically like our XML node object that we had in the past, where this is the whole XML we have, except now it's in JSON. And the next function right under that is where we pull values out of that XML. So we're using now the XML to JS-X path. And that piece is basically we're doing a find, which lets us put an X path. That's the vMix preview we have right here. And it's saying, using this using this X path, find the element that I want inside the XML that we just downloaded. And take the value that's at that location. That's what that at is. It's a very literal at. So whatever is at that location, take and assign that to the preview input. And so what we've done is taken the XML, found the element that was in preview, which is just the number of the input, and assign that value to preview input. Same types of things we've done in the past. But the key thing here is now we're doing it completely outside of vMix. We were simply talking to the XML that vMix writes to pull that data in and manage everything we want. So now that we know the preview, we're doing the same thing. If this was the one that we already told the SuperJoy to load up, then just go to sleep and loop back and wait to see if some new input is put into preview. That's exactly what we did the last one. It's exactly what we're doing here. And if it is a new one, now we take and say, okay, take the preview input that we just found, put it back into the old preview input. So now we know when we compare the next loop, that one's already been sent. And now we're going to tell the SuperJoy what we needed to do. And this is, again, the same type of model. We're using Axios, we're doing a get, and we have this entire link that we set up, which is the HTTP API that is for the SuperJoy. And we're telling it, select the group and the camera that we specify here using preview input. So same thing as before. And we're setting a half a second timeout. So when it sends that, if it doesn't get a response in half a second, then we'll get an error. And that's all we're doing. This is just a property that we've added that's part of what Axios supports. So we're just telling it, wait half a second to make sure it takes. If not, then trigger an error. So if there was an error, we will process that. If there wasn't, we will actually change the code, change the selection on the SuperJoy, just like we did before, and keep going. So the difference now is if we have an error, what we are going to do, and this is slightly different, let me get off of that, slightly different from what we did before. We'll just post an error to the console, to say, okay, we couldn't make the request to the SuperJoy. But then we said, let's throw in something a little different. So what we're going to do as well is if somebody's trying to do something that talks to the SuperJoy and it fails, we're just popping up a different input into preview to say, you're no longer connected to the SuperJoy. So that's what we're doing here with this Axios get. And now we're talking to vMix. And we're telling vMix, execute the function to assign input 4 to preview. This is standard vMix type functionality. And now we're just driving it through Node.js. And so we'll put that up. And that will be something that the operator will know right away. Okay, the SuperJoy, I know I put one of my cameras into preview, but the SuperJoy isn't responding, so I know I can't control it from there. So it gives feedback and sort of a second direction. So now we're controlling the SuperJoy, we're controlling vMix as well. And if it isn't talking to the SuperJoy, we just turn around, wait 10 seconds, give people whatever time they need to plug it back in or figure out why, and then we loop back and start over with the process. So there is a lot to digest here, uh, but it's basically the same code. And if you look at it side by side, I think that will help make some of the things that we did here sort of line up with what we've already covered with vMix scripting. So let me just demonstrate now. So you see, there's a few things that I want to point out. So if I actually just jump back in here to the code, if I'm in here now, let me just flip here. So what I did is I just hit Control backtick, which is the little back apostrophe that's on the upper left of most keyboards. And I just wanted to show you this little thing that we opened on the bottom. So this is basically terminal. It gives you command line access into the operating system. So this is available across all different operating systems. Under Windows, it can be the standard command line or PowerShell, which is what we're using here. Mac has terminal, Linux has terminal, so easy to do. But let me just show you exactly, because this is just running in the background. So now I just have a standard command line prompt. And the way we set everything up was we would do what's called npm, which is Node Package Manager, and you tell it start. And what this will do is it will, let's see if I can show you here. It'll come up here, and I just clicked on package.json. It'll come up here and basically say, okay, this is what I'm going to be running. And when somebody says start, what I want to do, see here with scripts, it will be, I want to use Node to run index.js, which is exactly a package. So that's what we're doing down here. We're just going into this package that we have for our application, clicking start, and it runs up. You see it runs Node.js, and now it's running in the background. So if I were to, I'm going to shut down vMix here. And what you will see, now that I'm going to say, do you want to close vMix? Yes. So now you can see this is coming back and telling me it failed to get the vMix API. And what's really cool here is that I'm running this as localhost, but I could be running this with just an IP address and talking to vMix from any other system on my network in the production space. So now if I open vMix again, it'll basically get going. We'll just load up the last guy we had in there. Okay, so now we are up and reconnected. So the failure messages will stop. We were just checking every 10 seconds. So that's the first thing that you'll notice. The second thing is if I want to demonstrate, if I were to unplug our SuperJoy, so I'm just going to go and take and unplug this now. So it is no longer connected. If I go to do something, so let me just switch over here, you will see that we have a failed to make a GET request to the SuperJoy. So now it's detecting this as well. And again, just as a separate application that's running. And it keeps retrying. So let me actually just show you, though, how this would look as I go into the vMix interface, because we saw that there, and it's trying to make the request. But now if I go over to the vMix interface here, and let me just, so I have, so if we switch over to this, let's see. Okay, second. So what I have here now is when I'm clicking, this is working exactly as expected. It's switching things over in the SuperJoy. But now if I unplug this, so I'm going to do this unplug again, and we're disconnected. Now if I go and change my preview, it goes out to the SuperJoy, can't make the connection, and so the script is telling this, okay, load in this connection unavailable image into my preview. And no matter what I do, that will stay there. If I plug everything back in, so now with this is initializing and coming back up. So I'll just give that a moment. So now that the SuperJoy is back, if I click, everything goes back to normal. And so let's put this in here. Oh, so let's see. So that gives me basically a very clean way, not just to control things, but also to provide feedback as we as we start to develop this code. Because in more complex things, you're going to need to know more about the devices around you with more sophisticated automation that you'd want to do. So let me check up back in the comment section here. So so Guy said the drink was for me. So I definitely could have used that in the beginning. I was choking a bit there. So let's see. We also have Patrick from Houston, Texas. Patrick, thank you for coming here and joining us. I appreciate that. Let's see. Guy has also commented, says, by the way, use. Okay, I should change the fonts I have so we can visualize the emojis in vMix Social. That's a good point. I should look into that. So I appreciate that as feedback. That's great. Thank you, Guy. So I have Nitesh from India. Nitesh, thank you for joining us here. I appreciate it. I have Jonia. So Jonia is asking what my earpiece setup is. So for here, the earpiece that we have these are just Shure earbuds that we're using. We have a 900. I think it's PSW 900 is the monitoring system we use, and we take feedback, so I can hear if we have a caller or anybody from the studio side on running the production could talk to me and just tell me if something's going on. So that's all basically running through the one system, and we route the audio through the mixer for all of that. But it's a fairly simple system. So Alan's asking, so Node.js needs to run in a console? Yes. So the way this would start up is you can create multiple instances of a console, though. So you can run multiple concurrent Node.js scripts. So you're not limited to one. And you also could launch them in bat files. So you don't even yourself need to launch the console and do everything. You can just create bat files that will execute, with a single command, or even on startup, that will get everything running that you would want to have running in a production. So in terms of, because Alan's following that, I says, and do I need to write my own packages? Actually, no. And this is one of the incredible things about Node.js is I am probably understating this, that there are many hundreds to thousands of packages available inside of Node.js. And it works very simply. So if you are creating a package that you want to make public, you can register that with nodejs.org. And then anybody that types install and a package name inside of Node.js, that will go up to nodejs.org. It'll find the details for the package, send that down, and then that installation can happen. You can also have multiple versions. So if you have one script that maybe needs an older version, you can specify in the package which version of it you need, or a minimum version. So if you need to make sure that the package is at least a certain level, you can do that as well. So a lot of great things around packages. Packages are just out there as part of the open source bundle you get. The packages themselves may not be open source, but access to them is free. So they sort of are an open license for them. So gives you a lot more power than you'd get normally. And it doesn't really, it's basically part of a free toolkit to develop that. Fantastic community around these things. So that really is great. So let's see. So I also have Team 4M. So uh, this is Holger. So Holger, thank you for joining us from Germany. That's great. Yeah, I think a lot of these things that we're going down now with automation, there's a lot that I need to learn still. I mean, I think for all of us, we're always learning new things as we come across them. And I am very open to any suggestions that everybody out here in the community has for things you'd like us to cover. So not only are we, sort of moving on our own where we want to go, but we're also really driving that direction by what we think people are going to be interested in having us discuss. So, but so let's see. Oh, yep. So I've just Anderson Springer. I'm sorry I missed your uh, post earlier. Uh, Andy, thank you for joining us from Barbados. So hopefully, we get to we get to see you around here in the future. It's always great, to have you join, and great to see people from so many different locations that are part of this community. That's really, really exciting to me. So let's see. So Alan has a few more things. He just says, Alan was just mentioning, he says, I have lots to learn. And I think that's true. That's true for me as well. So this is a journey that I'm excited to take with everybody in the community as we start to learn what we can do with this. So I have American Newscape saying, is this uh, Node.js or Node.js? So this is Node, Node dot JS. And the JS is for JavaScript. Node.js is an open source package. And if you go to Node, NODEJS.org, O-R-G, that's where you'll be able to download everything and really get started with this. All right. So I think we've wrapped up this show. There was a ton of stuff in here. So apologies for throwing it all out at you. But like I said, this is the first look. More than anything, I wanted to get everybody thinking about the possibilities as we look beyond what we can do in vMix scripting by itself. It's not like we're going to abandon it. There's to be a lot more shows on vMix scripting, but we really want to expand the horizons that we have for some of the automation that we can do, especially going as we're starting to think about 2022 and what we want to do in our next season. So we'll call this a wrap. We will hang around for the after show. And please, if you have questions, please think about anything you'd like to ask, and we'll try to cover it. And it doesn't have to be just on what we did right now. And it can be on any topics around streaming, production. If I can answer it, I'll be happy to. And if I can't, I'll sort of throw it out, and I welcome everybody else's input on this. So if I see you in the after show, that's great. If not, we won't see you next week. Next week is going to be the day after Thanksgiving for those of us in the U.S. And so we're actually going to be lights out for a week and try to take some relaxing time with family. But we will see you the week after. And if we see you in the after show, that's great. Be back in a few seconds. Take care, everyone. Thank you. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back. So this was a scary one for us because it's all brand new. So your first show when you cover something that's totally new is always a little bit of a jitter with this, but I am really excited about what is available in Node and the types of things we're going to be able to do. Because today we just really touched on sort of a rough outline of some of the constructs inside of Node and compared it to what we just did last week with .NET scripting in vMix. But there's a lot in Node. I mean, some of the things, and this is going to take me a while to learn, and we're going to get to it, but you can create UIs. You can create web servers that will allow external HTTP requests to drive things that Node does. So that would let you do things like set up Stream Deck buttons that control automated scripts inside Node that control other devices. So a lot of stuff in here and a lot of ground that we will get to cover in our next season. But it is fun to think about everything that's possible with this. So I know I'm excited. It's like a shot of adrenaline for me for all the new stuff we can get to do. So let's see. So Anderson said I used your script for merge and love it. Took out all that soft fade seen in the normal. Yep. So there's I think merge is a cool function inside of vMix for doing that sort of nice smooth repositioning, especially with the number of productions we're all doing with sort of multi-box shots where you're going to want to be able to go from a 2-box to a 3-box and just sort of shrink and reposition things. So merge gives a really nice way to do that visually. So it had its own limitations, with stacking order for layers, but all we did with that script was whoever we were going to start to move next, we made sure the merge stack had the person we wanted on top uh, move to the top of the layer stack. And so it was something pretty simple, but I think it just made what was a cool function a little bit smoother visually. So let's see. So Anderson also he said, still waiting for script for horse racing with name of horse, jockey, weight on the trading. Yeah, I mean we've looked at that, and I don't have anything back for that yet. But the point I make is now that we're out of vMix scripting, we may have some more possibilities for how we can drive some of this stuff. So it isn't something that's a natively easy thing to do though with GT Title Designer. So that was the limitation why we haven't really rounded out anything for that yet. But we haven't forgotten the request there. So Alan mentioned cool. Yes. uh, in summary, Alan, this is cool stuff. I love the possibilities here. So thank you for concurring on that one. Uh, so John Drinkwater is saying, so the big question for me uh, is this the code that we can link everything? And it looks like the answer is yes. So the yes, the quick answer is yes. It isn't dependent on any one vendor's solution. So it'll allow you to link across systems, across sites, uh, anything that you can do through an HTTP request in this case will be very easy to do in Node. But it has a lot more capabilities to it. I mean, think of the packages and the different extensions. So working with data is going to be amplified. The control logic we can do in this will be amplified. You can have different functions and reuse them, and that will make script management a lot simpler because now you basically build your own libraries of your code functions that are specific to you, and then you just reassemble them the way you want, just like we did with where we created the sleep function. That's what you'll end up doing for yourself. You'll build sets of functions that you can then deploy over and over. When you upgrade those functions, you can actually get that benefit in all your scripts. So a lot of goodness that comes from this, both in terms of functionality as well as manageability. So yes, I think this is the one ring to rule them all sort of thing. Nothing's perfect, but definitely it'll really fill that role pretty nicely, I think, for higher end, more complex functionality and automation. So So Alan is asking, what episode was that merge again? I I don't know off the top of my head. If you go to YouTube in season two, every one of them is named, and I believe it talks about a scripting and the merge function. So it was. So I'm just getting told it looks like it's episode 21. So you can check that out. Now hopefully we'll cover some of the things you're interested with that. So let's see. So John Drinkwater is back with, I have multiple vMix licenses. I guess Node.js could work with a lesser SD license that does not need to have vMix scripting. Uh, I believe that's the case. I believe that as long as you can do HTTP requests to read the vMix XML, which I believe is available in all versions, and you have the ability to execute HTTP requests. So if you could, in your Stream Deck, put in an HTTP request to drive that vMix SD uh, or their basic vMix HD basic, you should be fine. And that again, it gives a little more flexibility, but it will also let you do things across multiple vMixes. Inside of the code we looked at, we use localhost because we're just running one vMix. But if you had vMix running on multiple boxes, so say you had a lower end, like we used to have a vMix basic HD license that we used for uh, vMix Social. Basically, it was our way to put up comments. That you could run on one system, and you could run your full vMix production on another, and use Node to talk to both of those via direct IP addresses separately. And that will give you sort of synchronized control across multiple vMix instances, which again could add a lot of power to some of the things you're doing. So let's see, we have Fan Films. So hello, Fan Films. Thank you for joining us from Brazil. And he's here just checking the news. That is always good. So thank you for taking the time to join us here. So uh, Anderson said thank you. So no, Anderson, thank you for being patient. We do try to get to things when they come in as requests. Some of them are just more complicated. We don't have an immediate way to do it. But if we figure something out, that will be definitely something we'll share with you, and probably do a show about it to share it with everybody. So Alan is asking, will this affect browsers that block JavaScript, such as Firefox? So this, let me separate these two. What Firefox, if you by default block JavaScript, that means that if I loaded a website that was doing something that leveraged JavaScript, you would not be able to execute that website as the author intended using Firefox if JavaScript were blocked. This has nothing though to do with the Node.js. You're not running Node.js. You are in fact explicitly running Node.js outside the browser. That's sort of the foundational design of it. It was set up so that you could take the JavaScript code that web developers were already familiar with and execute it now in an external framework. And so that will have no impact, based on anything else you're doing. So in JavaScript, if in Firefox, if you type in a HTTP address that triggers something inside of Node.js, and you could get a result back, that JavaScript is executing somewhere else. So to Firefox, that just looks like an HTTP request with a response. And so it would experience a very normal send and receive of data to render, and the JavaScript would be executing somewhere else. So it would not have any impact there for if you're doing things that would be similar to that. So John John Dringo says, thanks for giving me a big project for the holidays. Connect all my things to Node.js. So yeah, I think this is really what I'm excited about. If it gets you thinking and you find exciting things, please share them because uh, definitely would love to expand this into different areas that people are interested in. And I know, I mean, for people that aren't familiar with John, John is out of the UK. He's part of Toastmasters, I believe, John. So correct me if I'm wrong, but he has been running events uh, there for probably the past year and a half, 2 years, and has grown from a smaller, more modest production now to hosting multi guest productions with large audiences and really some very significant productions there. So uh, I think as a role model, John is really fantastic because he's just diving in and expanding what he can do and going from a great start point to now things that are truly impressive and we can all learn something from. So really cool stuff. So if you if John, if you want to share anything that you've done, please feel free to post in the comments and let people see some of the latest because it I've looked at it and it is definitely pretty impressive. So let's see. So, okay. So Anderson Springer just came back and he posted the link to the merge video that we had. So Anderson, thank you for that. And John says he will have his own show starting in 2022. So John, that is fantastic. Keep me in the loop. We'll have to you know, we'll have to, post that here and make sure everybody's aware of it. I definitely will have to start watching that. And let's plan on having you on, once you start on here, and we can talk about what you're doing and what you're covering, because a lot of things in this community are all complementary. And I know part of what you bring that's really unique is you have a native now experience with public speaking. So it's something that you are much more comfortable with and you understand more of, about how to approach an audience and how to engage an audience. So those types of things that Toastmaster brings, though not technical, are really critical to anybody who's looking to do a successful stream. So I don't know whether it's a hybrid of presentation and technology, but whatever it is, I'm definitely looking forward to it. So thanks for sharing that. So we're going to do a quick wrap up then. If you have any questions, get them in now. But as I mentioned, if you want to download Node.js over the holidays at nodejs.org, and we will be doing some shows with that. And hopefully, this will be something that people will be interested in digging into. But please, really interested in your feedback here because I know this is another branch that we're going down with the production space and automation. So we want to make sure that this is a ride that everybody's interested in taking. Because if not, then we'll definitely sort of measure how we integrate this into the shows we do. So let's see. So a few more things. So Anderson's asking, has anyone been using Panel Builder for vMix? So I have not, but I'll be honest, we don't, outside of our own shows here, uh, we're a development shop, so we don't really do productions. But there may be other people that have used Panel Builder. I have heard of it, but I haven't really done anything with it, so I can't give any feedback. But please, anybody, if you've used Panel Builder or can point Anderson, in the direction of some good videos or resources around it, I would certainly appreciate that. So we also have American Newscape. Thank you for it's anything we do as a resource here is really driven by the community. So I thank you and everyone else who tunes in every Friday to be a part of this. So as I mentioned, we won't be here next week. For those in America that are celebrating Thanksgiving, have a great holiday with family. And for everybody else that's joining us from someplace that doesn't necessarily celebrate Thanksgiving, uh, just it's a great occasion for us to sort of tick through the things that we are all grateful for in our lives. And so that's something I think even those not celebrating the holiday can certainly relate to. So thank you all. I will see you now in 2 weeks and enjoy. Be safe.